We really appreciate your being with us again. And the next panel is about collaboration models among the tax administration and the private sector for tax electronic control. The purpose of this panel is to share experiences with regards to what is happening in other countries with regards to the support provided by the private sector and how they're working together with the tax administrations. So I would like to introduce from Paraguay Pedro Velázquez Ferreira, Infrastructure Coordinator from the IT Direction in Paraguay. Thank you very much for being with us. We also have from the U.S. Paul J. Memo. He is the Executive Director of Request Processing of the Revenue Service in the United States. And from Mexico, we have Jose Ernesto Luna Vargas. He is the General Administrator of the Federal Tax Control. Thank you very much for being with us. If the process that we're going to follow, we're going to ask questions to the panel, and the panelists, if you want to share more information, please do so, and feel free to participate anytime. And we're going to ask the questions in English. Most of the people here are not using headphones. I'm going to be translating the questions into Spanish, and I'm going to ask the questions in English and in Spanish so we can have the information in both languages. So I would like to start with Pedro Velázquez from Paraguay. And could you please share with us, Pedro, currently in Paraguay, and I think it's important to give some information about what is happening in Paraguay. I would like you to tell me the inhabitants in Paraguay, the number of taxpayers, and the tax administration role in Paraguay, and if you are currently using mechanisms with the private sector, and what is that relationship between the private sector and the tax administration. What I can say is that when I was listening to the rest of the lectures, I realized that we as countries, we're very small, have less inhabitants and taxpayers than the rest of the presenters. And mainly, if I'm here today, it's because we are looking for models to be adopted for e-billing. In fact, that's the purpose of my attendance to this forum, to see the different figures and models that have been adopted by other countries and see what can be implemented in my country. So I don't have the statistics now because I have it in my room, but I thought that would be presented later on, but I have that information. But Paraguay, with regards to the collaboration with the private sector, it has a certain collaboration for collection purposes through collection agencies. These are entities that help us collect. These are the banks that receive the tax returns and the payments, and then that money is transferred to the tax administration. Now, with regards to payments, there are some agreements with some banks where the taxpayers have their accounts, and through those accounts, electronic payments can be made. So this is done online through optic fiber. It's part of the agreement. The bank that is going to be doing the wire transfer, there has to be an optic fiber connection, and from there, the transfer is made. With the collection agencies, this is done through internet. There's a user, and through that user, they can transfer per batch of all the information that they have received. In all cases, for the taxpayers that has filed a tax return, that can be seen the next day, because the processes are done overnight, and the following day that can be seen in the system. The undersecretary has some projects. By 2015, that would be done online in such a way that one can file a tax return or a sworn tax return directly in the bank or directly through the website. That is going to be included in next year's project. That is what we have right now with regards to collaboration of private sector with the public sector. Well, I'm going to paraphrase what you just mentioned. Tax filing can be processed through the banking system. Yes, that's correct. Is that done online? No, it's not done online yet, but the following day, that information is updated. So the taxpayer files the tax return at the bank, and also the payment can be made at the bank. Yes, both things. Well, in certain banks, not exactly where you can file your tax return, you can make the payment. That's not necessarily true, because there are banks where you can make electronic payments, and because in Paraguay, the bank, there are two processes. One is tax filing and the other one is tax payment. So based on that, a secretary of an electronic secretary or an electronic agency was created to support all those electronic processes. The undersecretary started in 2007 and migrated the whole system. Since then, the taxpayer can file the taxes or the tax return online. Well, not really online, but with the Parangatu system, the taxpayer has a user, has a password, and the sworn tax return may be filed there, but the payment may not be made. There are co-modalities. One co-mode is when a user has an electronic password from the undersecretaries, and from there, that taxpayer has a profile and can file the tax return, that sworn tax return, and the payment has to be done through the banking system. The person that does not have an access code has to go to the bank, take that document, that hard copy, and that information is processed by the bank. So we have two modes, let's say. Thank you very much for your answer. Paul, en Estados Unidos tienen toneladas y toneladas de contribuyentes y tienen que procesar muchísima información. We know that in the U.S. there are tons and tons of taxpayers that have to make that process. ¿Cuáles son las alianzas que se han hecho con terceros para que el contribuyente obtenga el beneficio y el apoyo de ese tercero para presentar la declaración? I'm asking about the ways that the taxpayer can work together with the private sector to file the tax return. ¿Me pueden escuchar? Bueno, primero que nada, gracias. No me van a ver en otros paneles después de este, lo prometo. Una de las cosas y lo que hacemos en el sistema de administración fiscal, lo describimos como un ecosistema fiscal. Voy a dar más detalle posterior de esto, pero el software que desarrollamos es 90% tanto comerciales y de las personas físicas se hacen de manera electrónica, todo lo que son las declaraciones. No quiere decir que la presentación de las mismas se hace en forma electrónica. También tenemos personas que representan a los contribuyentes y también tenemos 32 estados que requieren de una declaración de impuestos. Tenemos aliados muy fuertes. Los empleados son un gran aliado. También la comunidad bancaria. Les voy a dar unos ejemplos posteriores, pero déjenme hablar de los estados, porque mencioné que hay 32 estados con los que estamos aliados en la actualidad. Muchos contribuyentes ven la idea de la declaración de impuestos o de presentación de la declaración de impuestos como una sola operación. A veces tenemos una federal y en una local, y muchas veces si viven en diferentes áreas y en diferentes estados, entonces tienen que presentar una por cada estado. Well, in the states, there are federal states tax return filing. Entonces, en ese caso sería una entidad pública, ¿verdad? En ese caso. Sí, es a nivel estatal. No lo describiría como algo público, sino es una cuestión estatal. Ellos controlan sus finanzas y cómo gestionan sus impuestos a nivel estatal. Lo que hemos hecho, hemos formado relaciones cercanas con ellos para que cuando se quiere presentar una declaración estatal y federal, lo pueden hacer a través de una transacción, y lo que nosotros hacemos es nos quedamos con una parte y la que es estatal lo mandamos a un buzón y después ya se entrega. Basically, what he's saying is that when there are federal or state returns, that can be done through just one transaction where the federal part is taken and the state one is sent to a mailbox. Entonces, hay una relación entre el gobierno y el gobierno federal y el gobierno estatal, o hay un tercero. Bueno, es lo que nosotros describimos como los originadores de declaraciones electrónicas. Entonces, dependiendo del software que desean utilizar, proviene de ellos y tienen que tener una relación con las autoridades estatales. Entonces, básicamente tenemos acuerdos con ellos y todo lo que define los protocolos desde el punto de vista de seguridad, desde la cuestión de comunicaciones y transacciones, las declaraciones van a ser aceptadas o rechazadas. Entonces, estos acuerdos se tienen que renovar cada año debido a las actividades con respecto a los cambios de las leyes fiscales. Déjame hablar un poco de lo que estás diciendo. Básicamente es que va a haber diferentes proveedores de software que están relacionados con el gobierno, y esos son los que tienen la facilidad de hacer la integración. Déjeme traducir. So what Paul is saying is that there are software providers that have a relationship with the government, and every year, depending on the updates and releases, the adjustments will be. Pero estos son los terceros que están interconectados con los gobiernos, y cada contribuyente puede decidir qué software va a utilizar para hacer los procesos para las declaraciones. So people connect through these third parties that are from the private sector. They offer the software services and they choose those software services to file the returns. Bueno, el contribuyente tiene elección, pueden presentar su declaración federal y estatal, pero nosotros reconocemos por cuestiones de servicio al cliente, sabemos que la mayoría de los contribuyentes lo ven como una sola transacción. Entonces las declaraciones federales pueden venir junto con la declaración estatal, y la declaración estatal dispara información de la declaración federal. Entonces, en lo que hemos descrito, una fase que se llama declaración individual, y luego tenemos 160 formas que pueden estar relacionadas con esa forma única a nivel estatal. Eso es algo mucho más pequeño. Entonces, cuando se hace a nivel federal, la mayoría de la información se lleva a nivel estatal, y hay, por supuesto, un beneficio para el cliente, para el Estado y también para las compañías proveedoras. Lo que está diciendo Paul entonces es que cuando tienes una presentación de una declaración, la información a nivel federal también se utiliza para local para el estado y así se tiene la información para ambas partes. Sí, el software, cuando pasamos por un proceso de entrevista, jala la información. Cuando se prepara una declaración, jala la información federal y también al mismo tiempo la estatal. Then what Paul is saying is that when the return is filed, the information is going to be taken for the federal and state return. Con respecto a los estados y a los desarrolladores de software, lo que se describe como originadores de software son personas que nos mandan la declaración y si esta declaración no se llena completamente, entonces, pues nuevamente nos referimos a ellos. Entonces, cada archivo de declaración es único debido a la legislación que se aceptó en el año anterior. Si hay algún cambio en la ley fiscal, el software se tiene que actualizar para obedecer las leyes y reglamentos que se hayan aprobado recientemente. Entonces, tenemos que asegurarnos de que el software que estén desarrollando cumpla de manera voluntaria con las obligaciones de los contribuyentes, tanto para los de las personas físicas como las personas morales. So, the U.S. government works very closely with software developers to guarantee voluntary compliance of all the parties, and the information is validated before the information gets to the U.S. recipient. Ahorita regreso contigo, Paul. In Mexico, we have different integration mechanisms with the private sector. Could you please mention some of them? Before anything, I would like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here, Paul, Pedro. It's a pleasure for us to have you here in Mexico. Well, we could divide this in two major streams. The first one would be fiscal management and support to fiscal management and compliance support. So the Mexican model can be divided into these major areas. The first area regarding fiscal compliance can be seen in different agreements. IT agreements, where through third parties, we are able to get that technological infrastructure to be able to provide the internal and external services in the tax administration. That is for our internal customers within the other departments and the taxpayers. This is technological infrastructure, service infrastructure, networking, networks, etc. Well, with regards to fiscal management, we can find other types of devices or tools that are also used in Mexico as a collaboration model. We're talking about agreements, we're talking about approvals, concessions. In each of these, I can give you an example of what a concession is. Maybe many of the people attending this forum does not know that we have concessions through two private sectors for VAT return to tourists. So take advantage of that if you're coming from abroad, because you just need to have certain requirements and you can get the return of anything that you buy in Mexico, provided you take out those products. And this is a concession to a third party. This is part of the involvement of the private sector in the fiscal management. Another topic that has come up at the table is approval to be able to be an approved certification supplier. This is part of the collaboration of a third party through the compliance of certain rules. Many of the people attending today are companies that are known as PACs, PACS, and they can seal the digital fiscal receipts. So this is another example of the collaboration with the third-party sector, and this has to do with support to compliance. Another example is the brokers. The customs brokers are the representatives of the taxpayers for custom clearance. Fiscal management with regards to foreign trade, one of the important things that may be mentioned is that through a party, which is a customs broker, is an individual or a company that is representing a third party to go through custom clearance. So this is another example on how the fiscal administration or tax administration is working together with the private sector. So this is like the first area. Now the second major area is fiscal compliance support. Well, with regards to fiscal compliance, the tax administration uses the different associations or the different bodies that compile the different industries or areas, commercial areas. So we just signed an agreement with the CCA in order to spread information with regards to fiscal laws. There was an agreement at a secretary level with the the Entrepreneurial Coordinating Council, so that every time the fiscal authorities wants to issue a regulation such as electronic accounting, all these types of adjustments, rules, new ways of compliance, before these rules are released and are used, these rules have to be discussed with the Entrepreneurial Council to be able to put them into practice in a more accurate manner. So that has to do with management and is compliance support. In this way, the society and the private sector support the tax administration and the rest of the taxpayers through those agreements that have to do with compliance support of the regulations are work together. So these are some of the ways we are currently collaborating with the private sector. Pedro, in your opinion, what would be an opportunity for Paraguay to widen the fiscal collection through the support of private third parties that could help improve based on the improvements that you have seen and the things that can be done in Paraguay? So you have told us that that collaboration is done with the banking system, and they receive the tax returns, and that's part of the mechanism used. So what other mechanisms could be used? Well, I mentioned before that the taxpayers have two modes. One, the taxpayer has a code or a password or a user code, so that through a software that is provided by the secretariat, that taxpayer can file the returns at home or from home. There's a software that can be used to file returns, and there is a software that is called in the Maranga 2 system, where that software is located. At that point, the banking system is not included. That's something that was just recently implemented, that is 1 year ago. File returns You can file the returns without a password. Because a year ago, if you had to file a sworn tax return without any movement, you had to go to the bank. Now you can and get a password. Now you can do it now without having a password. That's something that was offered by the Undersecretariat, so you could meet or comply with your obligations. But the other mode is you can have a user or you can go to the bank to file your return. So with that, voluntary compliance is easier for the taxpayer. And we also have the payment. The person that is going to be making the payment can be done through the banking system. That is, you can file your sworn return at home and then you get a ticket. And with that ticket, you go to the bank and you make the payment. Do you have offices where the return can be filed directly? There are two types of taxpayers. We have the small taxpayer and the large taxpayers. For the large taxpayers, there is an office that receives all these tax returns, and that office can also receive the payments, but the rest have to do it through the bank. En el caso de Estados Unidos, ¿cuál sería el porcentaje de pagos que usted cree que está recibiendo Estados Unidos a través del banco y cuál es el porcentaje que está recibiendo directamente de las oficinas? Bueno, quiero poner un contexto un poco. Hablé de los reembolsos, por ejemplo. Muchos de nuestros contribuyentes comerciales o compañías lo hacen a través de este modelo. Y tenemos este modelo para la persona física, es cumplimiento voluntario a través de los terceros, pero con respecto a los pagos, el año pasado te estamos tomando como a 113 millones de pagos. Esto te da el alcance. Lo que lo hace difícil es que de estos 113 millones de pago, normalmente muchos de estos son en una ventana de 2 meses. Entonces nos asociamos con instituciones financieras para que nos ayuden con el proceso del pago durante ese periodo. En promedio, tenemos el proceso de verificación y también el proceso electrónico y el de cheques. Como el 65% de nuestros pagos ya son electrónicos y tenemos un sistema de pago federal en donde tenemos otra dependencia federal que son los que tienen el dinero para el gobierno federal. También nos asociamos con ellos para los reembolsos, pero también nos asociamos con otros para los pagos electrónicos. Hacemos esto para 25 millones. Estos 25 millones son en cheques. De los 113, they receive about 116 million, and 25 million of them are done through checks. Sí, esos cheques vienen directamente a nosotros o a través de algunas instalaciones de proceso o en la cuestión remota en donde los procesos los convertimos en una parte electrónica y el 60% el que es electrónico es a través de bancos. Bueno, puede ser a través de servicios de tarjeta de crédito o en bancos o a través del buró de servicios electrónicos. También hay otras formas de pago, pero estos son los dos canales principales. So 60% of those payments are done electronically through banks, credit cards, or through another government agency that provides that support. En cuanto a la forma en que Estados Unidos lo está haciendo, ¿creen que el gobierno puede proporcionar este servicio a cada contribuyente por sí solo o creen que la colaboración con estas entidades les están ayudando? Bueno, ¿hablas de la preparación de los impuestos o ya la declaración? I'm asking if the U.S. government thinks that this partnership with the private sector is helping them to do it correctly or accurately or more efficiently. Bueno, con respecto a los pagos, porque utilizamos actualmente terceros, nosotros preferimos que utilicen los medios electrónicos. Una cosa que queremos ver es pagos electrónicos obligatorios, ¿verdad? Y eso sería lo mismo para reembolsos. Todavía hay gente que pide papel, pero del lado de reembolsos, la alianza de tener un tercero, pues es el modelo que tenemos actualmente. No, en este momento proporcionamos software, no competimos con la industria de los desarrolladores de software. Hay una gran presencia en nuestro cuerpo legislativo que representa a estas industrias. Por lo tanto, nosotros no estamos haciendo el desarrollo de software, no tenemos la capacidad de darle servicio a todos los contribuyentes que tenemos. Paul said that currently, because the way we are allied with third parties, they do not provide software for tax payment or tax return. It's done through third parties. Otra cosa es el hecho de que muchos contribuyentes prefieren lidiar con un profesionista de fiscal, alguien con quien conoce bien, en lugar de ir directamente con la autoridad tributaria. Si la autoridad tributaria está desarrollando el software y entendemos la perspectiva, ¿verdad? Desde el punto de vista de Estados Unidos, la perspectiva es que si tú estás preparando el software y también es la persona que está auditando, pues puede haber un conflicto de intereses. Muchas personas prefieren ir con un especialista fiscal, no quieren ir con las autoridades. Así es que nuestro modelo ha sido tal que nos estamos aliando con terceros y no creo que esto cambie en un futuro cercano. Well, Paul is saying that people in the U.S. look for tax professionals that are the people they feel comfortable with to file the returns, so all the criteria are met. All the criteria, is met, and if the IRS develop the software and then audit, there could be a conflict of interest. So he doesn't think there's going to be a change in the near future. So they are going to continue working with third parties, software developers. En cuanto a otros tipos de servicios que pueden estar proporcionando terceras partes, hablamos de reembolsos y hablamos también de declaraciones. An important thing, ¿cuál sería el porcentaje de reembolso y con respecto a las declaraciones? ¿Es más del 50%? En la parte individual es 72% que reciben este reembolso. Well, for individuals, 72% of the people that file a return receive a refund. Para casi todos hay un reembolso, pero las compañías tienen un saldo pendiente que nos deben. Well, most of them have a balance due. En reembolso, ¿puede explicar brevemente cómo trabajan con terceros para el reembolso? ¿Qué tipo de entidades? I'm asking what type of entities help you refund. Sí, solamente para los reembolsos. En los reembolsos es muy transparente, muy directo. Las personas que nos mandan la declaración, normalmente pedimos información de ruta del cliente o del contribuyente, y una de las cosas que hemos querido evitar, porque nuestro modelo es tal que en los últimos 5 o 6 años ha habido mucho fraude. Entonces estamos trabajando de manera muy cercana con la industria bancaria para poder tener filtros y desarrollo de actividades para evitar fraudes. Una vez, por ejemplo, si un reembolso sale a un banco, tenemos una relación con cerca de 100 instituciones bancarias de que cuando ven algo sospechoso, de hecho, de inmediato se refieren a nosotros para que nosotros consideremos quitar este reembolso. Desde 2010, sin más de 50,000 millones de dólares nos han dado este dinero. We work with over 100 banks. We have schemes to prevent or eliminate fraudulent movements. From 2012, they had a refund of $15 billion. So this has been a support from the banking system. Iba a utilizar un ejemplo. Muchos tienen cuentas bancarias y reembolsos en diferentes reembolsos que se van a la cuenta bancaria. Esa sería una forma de disparar una bandera roja, o quizás el nombre del reembolso no tiene que ver con el nombre de la cuenta bancaria, o por ejemplo una cuenta bancaria en donde nada más se ha tenido una pequeña cantidad de dinero y de repente se hace un reembolso muy grande. Estos reembolsos son críticos para nosotros. No solamente es el cumplimiento, sino limitar lo que son los pagos inadecuados o los pagos fraudulentos para asegurarnos que los contribuyentes no estén pagando por estos movimientos fraudulentos. Entonces, tenemos líderes de la industria que están trabajando con nosotros. Pudimos, por ejemplo, muchos reembolsos en donde pudimos identificar, por ejemplo, en donde iban a las prisiones, y ahora parte de la legislación es que se dé el nombre de la persona que está en la prisión. For instance, what Paul is saying that there are many refunds going to the same account number, and also there is some legislation has passed. There were refunds that were going to the prison, and the prisoner's name has to be reported now according to this law. Ernesto, the opportunity that Mexico has to provide these services through third parties, to be able to connect or to be able to work directly with all companies, with all taxpayers, means that there's a great challenge. So the question is, has Mexico seen that working with third parties, tax collection has improved, or do you think this is a neutral topic or nothing has occurred? Before telling you that fraudulent reimburse rings a bell, your question is very specific, but I'm not going to talk about what I mentioned before. Well, I think that Mexican fiscal administration or tax administration has worked very closely with the private sector, and it has been fundamental for compliance and for support. The collaboration agreements have had a very successful outcome, has had a very successful outcome. I think that he remembered when he started working in SAT on how the tax returns were filed many years ago, the taxpayer had to pay in our offices with all the things that happened with those resources, when how after receiving the payment, the list had to be made manually of the payments, and there was an optical recognition of characters, but that happened later on. And after having the list, you had to cross-reference this with other states of the universe of taxpayers in other areas. And if we were lucky, surveillance and control of the people that had paid their taxes and not, and that information was provided the following year, such as the payment of the taxes. Now let's see what is happening today. Through the support of the banking system, that is to receive all types of payments related to tax returns, nowadays the information can be provided right away through reference payment. We have the amount, the person, what was paid, and right there, and right then, with the help of the IT infrastructure, we can cross-reference the information to see who has paid and who hasn't paid. So in 3 days, the SAT knows which taxpayer paid, which taxpayer has not paid, and if there's a taxpayer that has not paid, then an invitation letter is sent right away. That support through third parties to manage compliance has been and will continue being essential for us. So what about fiscal collection? Well, I think that there are many areas of opportunity we have to look for. I think that the outcome has been favorable, positive, but we still have many things to do. But we could not do this without the support of third parties. That is tax return filing, that is sealing or stamping the invoices, custom clearance, also the private sector in tax administration or in tax management is essential. And I think that the increase on tax collection and the increase of better or improvement in a better administration have been the result of this collaboration, and we still need to do lots of things. What have you able to identify in other countries? For instance, if Paraguay could implement 2 improvement actions where the work could be done, and we have already talked about Mexico's case of working with third parties. Based on your opinion, which would be the 2 most immediate actions that could be put in place? What measures could be used to improve collection with the collaboration of third parties? Well, I think that one that could be very helpful is the Mexican model, to have an agreement with accountants or taxpayer professional that are the ones that can make taxpayers aware of the compliance with their obligations. I just want to mention that nowadays it's unthinkable the tax administration in Paraguay could work by itself. I mean, we could not be working without the collaboration of the banking system. Last year, I don't know if there was a crisis, but there was an issue with the banking system due to the costs. because there was an agreement with the banking system for receiving the payments, and the tax administration assessed the possibility of not working with the banking system, but after that, there was an assessment, and the tax administration in Paraguay realized that it's not possible to do so, and the tax administration continued with the agreements. So then they came up with this intermediate mode, because in the past all the tax returns were filed through the bank, and something intermediate was created. So the tax administration decided that anything that has to do with a tax return with no movements could be done through another mode, and that way the agreement continued. Nowadays, the tax administration cannot work by itself without the help of third parties, especially tax collection through the banking system. However, right now, we are currently discussing the possibility of e-billing. E-billing is the model we're looking for, which is the model that could be adopted by Paraguay, which is much better for Paraguay. So with that, we will be able to improve tax collection. Paul, ¿consideras que Estados Unidos podría proporcionar este servicio a los contribuyentes solos? ¿Y esto causaría problemas al gobierno de Estados Unidos? ¿O crees que esta relación con terceros debe de seguir y debería inclusive de expandirse? I'm asking about what do you think about that collaboration with third parties, and could the U.S. government work by itself, or do we have to continue expanding on that alliance? Bueno, para darte un poco del alcance, cuando estábamos recibiendo 50% de declaraciones electrónicas, teníamos un 12% teníamos un porcentaje alto en donde estábamos teniendo un footprint importante o huella importante. Esto se ha detenido, y en las actividades de transcripción, nuestra huella se ha reducido de manera importante. No creo que queramos incrementar esta huella. Lo que queremos hacer es continuar manteniendo esta presencia digital en los servicios en línea y seguirnos aliando con otras personas. Estamos prestando más servicios a través del IRS a los contribuyentes, pero nuestro modelo es proporcionar opciones a los contribuyentes para que vengan directamente con nosotros o a través del profesional de los impuestos. Les voy a dar varios ejemplos. Como es una gran mayoría de contribuyentes reciben el reembolso, están como muy al pendiente del estatus. Entonces, recibir llamadas telefónicas todo el tiempo puede ser muy costoso. Entonces, normalmente tenemos esta información en un blog, en una página de internet, y tenemos preguntas. Lo que estamos tratando de hacer es aliarnos con ellos para ofrecer nuestra información. En lugar de que el contribuyente se vaya a nuestro sitio de internet, podemos desarrollar un API en donde se extrae la información de nuestro sitio y la lleva a la suya. Estamos buscando las formas de ofrecer canales para los terceros o para los contribuyentes directamente para obtener la información del estatus de su reembolso con base en la preferencia de los contribuyentes. Well, Paul just mentioned that the relationship that they have with the private sector is the tax refund. The tax refund may be making the website very crowded, and many times this information can be channeled through third parties so that the third parties can provide a refund status. Si estoy correcto, algunos de los servicios que tienen los profesionales de los impuestos también te pueden dar un anticipo del reembolso, ¿sí? Sí, le llaman un préstamo de anticipo, de reembolso. Lo que están tratando de hacer a inicios de el año, tratar de alentar a las personas para que puedan tener un mayor retorno, porque la industria sabe que la gran mayoría de las personas obtienen reembolsos en esta época y saben que la forma de alentar la economía, además de podemos dar un préstamo, y esto nos lleva a un préstamo pequeño. Como les dije antes, se puede hacer un reembolso a través de un depósito directo a la cuenta del contribuyente, y normalmente esto tarda 30, 60 días o quizás, si es muy rápido, 20 días. Si el contribuyente lo quiere en 7 o 10 días, se puede pedir un préstamo de anticipo del reembolso. Esto es fuera del servicio. Es un valor agregado. Well, he's just mentioned that in some cases, the agencies responsible for tax refund have the refund anticipation loan. In other words, if I know that I am going to receive that refund soon, the same agency that is responsible for processing that refund can give me a small loan before the refund. This is an added value, knowing that 72% are receiving 72%, is receiving refunds. Do you have any comments about expansion and services through third parties, private third parties? Estamos trabajando ahora un poco más en los APIs, es decir, exportar información de nuestro sitio de internet al suyo, a su ubicación, y también estamos tratando de prestar más servicios como entrega de transcripción. Por ejemplo, esta transcripción es básicamente, ya sea persona física o persona o compañía o persona moral, puede obtener como el script o el guión de lo que estás, del estatus fiscal también, y esto se puede hacer en línea. Cuando estamos cubriendo, utilizamos XML para como protocolos de transmisión, y la información de esa declaración nos proporciona también información que nos ayuda a identificar actividades fraudulentas. Pero creo que el modelo en que estamos actualmente y también el modelo europeo es un poco diferente a lo que es facturas electrónicas, pero escuchar las conversaciones hoy de si Estados Unidos y IRS puede considerar este modelo. No sé si estemos ahí todavía, pero en otros países como en Brasil y México lo han podido hacer, y es algo que nos entusiasma mucho. Nuestro modelo es un poco distinto y quizás no vamos en esa dirección. Estamos con la idea de seguir trabajando con nuestros aliados, los que nos ayudan a ayudarle al contribuyente a que cumpla con sus obligaciones. Creo que mientras más servicios podamos proporcionar en un ambiente en línea, pues mejor será por todos. Estamos tratando de evitar contactos personales o telefónicos, porque estos son servicios muy caros, y ustedes como autoridades fiscales me imagino que también están promoviendo estos servicios en línea. So he has mentioned that they are working with these third parties to integrate communication and be able to export information to be shown to the taxpayers through these third parties APIs. These are integration mechanisms. We have been talking to SAT to discuss the possibility of exporting information and then be able to show that information to to the taxpayers, and also frauds where this is something that they've been working with the banking system to identify fraudulent activities. Ernesto, could you tell us a little bit about the vision in Mexico with regards to the mechanisms that are currently being used and the ones that will be used in the future? So what changes are the taxpayers going to be experiencing? So based on this, what are the support needs that all taxpayers would have to be able to learn how to fill out their returns, how to integrate with the back office systems, because this has to do with third parties that can connect this internally and then with you. What can you tell us about this? Well, SAT Vision at the midterm is to integrate all this information that is currently received through e-billing. And very briefly, we're going to start receiving all this information from e-accounting. This is something that is an accessory or complementary information of what we're already receiving that can be put into a cloud, and that information may be integrated in such a way so that we can get two results. The first the result or outcome is that the taxpayer will have all the information with regards to the e-file or e-binder. This has to be done with the support of the private sector with regards to IT and technological infrastructure, and also the fiscal intelligence, that is analysis of fiscal information that can lead us to the fact where the Mexican authorities will be able to have tax electronic control and regulation, that nowadays our tax laws and codes allow us, based on the tax reforms that were passed this year, the fiscal authority will be able to analyze and detect specific fraudulent activities, and this can be done with a pre-filled return. With this pre-filled return, the taxpayer will have the opportunity to clarify any discrepancies. And if that pre-filled return is not answered, then it would be a notification, or it would be considered as a notification for the taxpayer. This is an example of the direction that the tax administration is heading, based on the support of third parties, private third parties. So we will continue moving forward to more fiscal electronic control. We're going through a change that implies analyzing too much information, and then we're going to migrate to a platform where our fiscal auditors, people that are involved in this, we're going to be focusing much more on data analysis. So in the middle, there are many areas of opportunity. I think that one of the areas of opportunity is for the taxpayer to receive the information in an accurate manner, understand the information. This person will have to hire a taxpayer professional to see how the return will be filed, and it has to be previously checked before it is filed to determine the payment or whatever. So there are many areas of opportunities that I think that with the support of the private third parties, we will be able to cover all these areas of opportunities, and the tax administration will be much more efficient, and the private sector will be managing and integrating data through the different networks. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ernesto. So, conclusions. As a summary, we are perceiving is that the high amount of transactions of individuals and companies requires the help or support of the banking system of private companies for invoicing or e-billing in Mexico, for example, for refunding taxes to tourists. These all models need massive integration models, so the fiscal authorities can focus on more fiscal intelligence if the third parties are currently working on that. So being able to facilitate this, and I listen to the US, they would like to have less calls, less visits, physical visits, and concentrate on identifying the fiscal knowledge, because this is where they're going to be much more efficient instead of opening more offices, and because this is an issue. Thank you very much. Let's give our panelists a round of applause. Thank you very much. We would like to thank our panelists for their attendance and participation in this forum.